We kick off this hour with a big win for democracy, a big win for the truth. Rudy Giuliani's lies about Donald Trump's loss in Georgia tore apart, forever altered the lives of election workers Ruby Freeman and her daughter Shaye Moss. We've played on this program clips of both women explaining what their lives became, the horrors they went through, the threats to their lives and safety, the harassment, the seemingly permanent loss of their personal security, even needing to leave their homes for a period of time out of fear for their safety. Today, in a blistering ruling from a U.S. District Court Judge Beryl Howell, Rudy Giuliani was found legally liable for defaming both of them. That verdict came because Rudy Giuliani failed to comply with the lawsuit's discovery obligations. This suit is the one where just last month, Rudy Giuliani conceded that he made, in his words, quote, false statements about these two women, these two Georgia election workers, mother and daughter. Giuliani was no longer arguing that his statements about these two women, mother and daughter, were ever true. Just that the statements he made that destroyed the lives of a mother and daughter were statements that, in his view, were protected by the First Amendment. It's an argument that Judge Howell called out in her ruling this way, quote, Giuliani's stipulations hold more holes than Swiss cheese. With his latest stipulation expressly reserving his arguments that the statements complained of are protected and non-actionable opinion for purposes of appeal, the reservations in Giuliani's stipulations make clear his goal to bypass the discovery process and a merits trial. Yet, just as taking shortcuts to win an election carries risks, even potential criminal liability, bypassing the discovery process carries serious sanctions. Today's ruling means that the next step in this case will be a civil trial, where a jury only has to decide the amount of damages Giuliani has to pay Moss and Freeman. That is on top of the judge already ruling that he must pay more than $130,000 in sanctions for not handing over relevant information to the plaintiffs. In response, Giuliani's political advisor put out a statement that says this, quote, this 57-page opinion on discovery, which would usually be no more than 2 or 3 pages, is a prime example of, wait for it, Jim Jordan could have written this, folks, weaponization of the justice system, where the process is the punishment. This decision should be reversed, as Mayor Giuliani is wrongly accused of not preserving electronic evidence that was seized and held by the FBI, end quote. Rudy Giuliani's lies about Shaye Moss and her mom also feature prominently in the Fulton County indictment that came down 2 weeks ago. Among his other charges, Giuliani was indicted criminally for spreading false statements about them to Georgia legislators. That is where we start the hour. Some of our favorite experts and friends, professor of law at the University of Utah and First Amendment scholar Ronnell Anderson-Jones is with us, plus editor-at-large of The Bulwark, Charlie Sykes, is still here. With me at the table, host of Fast Politics podcast and Vanity Fair special correspondent Molly Jong-Fast is here, and the founder of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America and the host of the Independent Americans podcast, Paul Rieckhoff, is here. Ronnell, let's take this sort of piece by piece. Rudy Giuliani, it feels like, is in the same place Fox arrived at with Dominion, where the facts are not in dispute. A jury is just going to have to decide what the appropriate damages or punishment is. Is that right?
You're right that this case is one, and in fact was among the first of the suits filed, trying to take advantage of defamation law as a tool for combating 2020 election disinformation. It means that it's been in the court for a long while, which is part of the source of the judge's frustration here. The plaintiffs in these cases have been arguing not just that these knowing lies damaged democracy as a whole, but also that they caused targeted specific damage to them, that they turned their lives upside down and were the source of pretty significant harassment, both online and in person. And you're right that there is a connection between this and the wider set of suits that are happening here. In fact, the judge in today's order makes clear that part of what she suspects might have been Giuliani's strategy in this case was to hold back on engaging in discovery in this case, hold back on providing the kind of material that he's obligated by law to provide, because he was fearful that that information might be useful to others in other suits, including prosecutors. And the judge really wasn't having it. This is a fairly scathing 57-page document in which she makes clear that when you are involved in a lawsuit, you have an obligation to provide to the other party the materials that are necessary for the litigation of that suit. And having been warned repeatedly, and having been sanctioned repeatedly, and having still failed to provide that material, Giuliani now faces a default judgment. He is essentially now found liable for it, and we move forward to the damages stage.
Ronelle, I may have my political history wrong, but I believe it was Joe Biden, maybe in the 2008 cycle, that accused Rudy Giuliani as sort of a speaker of having every sentence include a noun, a verb, and 9/11. I mean, Rudy Giuliani of 2023 seems to be a guy with a noun, a verb, and the First Amendment. What are we learning? And I know two isn't a pattern. We need one more. But what are we learning from these defamation cases about the limits of the First Amendment?
Well, I think the judge made clear in this case, and judges have made clear in other cases, including, importantly, the Fox Dominion suit, that simply wrapping up one's knowingly false statements of fact in a package of opinion is not going to be enough to claim First Amendment protection. The court in the Fox case and the court here made clear that these arguments about First Amendment protection, the sort of arguments that I was only asking questions or I was only floating political opinions, can't be invoked in a defamation case when the assertions are assertions of fact, statements that are provably true or false, that a person was engaged in election fraud, that a person was sneaking ballots in suitcases, that a person was handing a USB drive to someone else. Those are assertions of fact that are provably true or false. And Giuliani himself conceded a month ago that they were not false. And so we see that there is an appeal to arguing First Amendment claims in these sorts of cases, but that also the courts are being quite critical of them when the core statements that are at issue are things that are not opinion at all, but rather are simply bold statements of falsity that the plaintiffs say they can prove the speaker knew were false at the time they said them.
Well, I mean, Charlie, there's also hollowness, right? I mean, the people clinging to the First Amendment as personal criminal defenses are the same people who didn't blink or blush when Trump described all the media as the enemy of the people. They're not actually arguing for the protection of the First Amendment in the United States of America. They're arguing for the right to knowingly lie and defame and damage, and in the case of Shaye Moss and Ruby Freeman, forever alter their lives and take away forever their sense of personal security.
Yeah, Lordy, there are consequences. Rudy Giuliani is a liar and a fraud, and now he's got a court ruling that underlines this, and Ruby and Shaye are able to get some justice. This reliance on the First Amendment is so deeply cynical because, of course, you know, all acts of defamation, all acts of fraud, of conspiracy involve some sort of speech. And that speech is not protected if you are engaging in this kind of defamation. So this is an important moment. I mean, it's part of this extraordinary fall from grace of Rudy Giuliani. But it is a reminder that there are courts of law where the rules of truth and evidence are very, very different than the political world and social media. And Rudy Giuliani is finding that out, and hopefully Donald Trump will soon as well.